Video, we're going to focus on how to use store procedures from within PowerApps to update multiple tables at one time. So stay tuned. In this video, we're going to go back a little bit and actually use our management tool that we built in our first few videos to update a few tables at one time. Now, there are a few options we have inside of PowerApps or in the data world in general, right? We generally would create a store procedure to go ahead and do a transaction to update multiple tables. You can do things like triggers, which are great, but they don't really work when you have tons and tons of records. The other alternative is to use Microsoft Flow from within PowerApps. At this time of the recording, PowerApps does not have the native ability to call store procedures automatically. It can talk to views for things like multi-table select statements, but for store procedures where I want to go ahead and do an update or delete across multiple tables within one big transaction, you're going to have to use a Microsoft Flow at this time. You'll notice down below there is a voting box to go ahead and say how important that feature is for you. But let's go ahead and learn how to do it the way we can do it today inside of Microsoft Flow and PowerApps. So what we have here in this application is our simple application to go ahead and remove and modify our projects. Now you'll notice that if I were to pick the French project, for example, I'm going to go ahead and play this. If I were to pick the French project and hit the delete, that it'll do a little loader right now, and eventually it will remove that project, hopefully. There we go. Now the Spanish project, though, is not going to work. This is because I actually have time cards that are associated with that project. So it's going to try to delete the parent record, but there are a ton of children records associated with that also. And you can see that from within our schema right here. I'm trying to go after this record right here, but I have tons of child time cards associated with that also. So in this case, I'm choosing not to do a soft delete. I want to do a hard delete on those records. So to do that, we're going to implement Microsoft Flow to implement that. So if I go over here, pick my little trash can here, you'll notice that when I pick my trash can, come on, let's go up to the icon itself here. You'll notice that I'm actually showing a spinner using a variable. I then select that record, and then I remove the record, and then I show the spinner turn it to false. Now this line right here of code is what's failing right now, and it's not reporting a very good error, unfortunately, either. It's just not working, right? So we need to fix that now. So we need to fix that by using a Microsoft Flow. Now I've already got the store procedure created, and you'll notice my store procedure, really simple T-SQL. I'm deleting against a time card, a child table. I then delete against the project table. I pass a project ID in, and I wrap the whole thing in a transaction. So if the time card fails, then the project will also fail also, and it rolls everything back gently. Now, we of course want to put some error handling in that and make it nice and pretty, but for the purpose of this video, let's focus on the core concept. So, to do this, I'm going to select my trash can one more time, and I'm then going to go to Actions, and then go to Flow. There's a number of ways we can get there. We could go to the little hamburger icon right here. We could go to flow.microsoft.com. In our case, we'll keep it simple, and I'm going to go ahead and just create new flow. Now, when we do that, it's going to create a shell flow for us from the template. And if I do that, now Flow is a pretty cool technology that Microsoft has. It's part of the Power Platform system. If you have Microsoft PowerApps, chances are you already have a license of Flow. They include a ton of different transactions a day you can use. Now, it basically creates a workflow. So delete from this, delete from this, delete from this. Maybe it's, hey, watch this table. If a record is added to that table, then go ahead and apply these other steps to the other tables also. Maybe it's watch my Twitter handle. And if a post happens on Twitter, then go ahead and insert that handle inside of my table also. There's lots of cool stuff you can do inside that. But back in here, in my case, I have a simple hook that we have that's going to be triggered from PowerApps. There's no additional configuration you have to do here. You could also have search for this hook. If you're creating from blank, you could search for that hook and you'll find PowerApps. It'll be a purple icon instead of this what we see right now. Now if I hit new step, I'm going to do a new action. Now I've already created the connection already. So if I search now for SQL Server, okay, it's going to be a little sluggish as it finds this. There we go. So if I search for SQL Server, it's now going to limit the rows it has, and one of the ones I want in this case is execute a store procedure. Now, flow can also be used for things like calling a record set also. The complexity of calling a record set inside of flow is much more elevated than doing deletes, updates, and doing simple insert statements, for example. But so if you want to do a select statement, your better bet might be to do a view on SQL Server, which is supported natively inside of PowerApps. So back over here again, you'll notice I'm actually pointing to my TimeCard database right here. So I have this connection right here already picked. I can point to additional connections right here though. I'm going to point to my store procedure, delete project, which you already saw. It's going to read that store procedure and find out it needs a project ID. So when I select it, I could type a project ID in there, but in my case, I want to ask PowerApps what project ID it cares about. So I'm going to go and ask PowerApps, and now I've got this new variable out there inside of Flow that's expecting to be passed in from outside of Flow. So it's going to be that execute store procedure. That's all there is to it. Very, very simple to do. So when I save this, let's give it a better name also. And that's called PowerApps button. So if I go ahead and type up here, top left, let's give it delete project from PowerApps. Now we can save that. We can also test it and pass in a project ID manually and watch it go. In our case, we're going to stop here though and do all of our testing inside of PowerApps. If we had a much more complex flow, then definitely we'd want to do testing inside that, of course, and watch it, step by step of what actually happens. In this case, a two-step PowerApp, no problem at all. So over here, you'll notice it kind of created some stub code. Well, it should have created some stub code. Looks like it didn't actually do that because it's a little too complex. So I'm going to take out my remove here, and I'm going to type in run. Ooh. And you'll see it actually has the PowerApp down below. And I'm going to go ahead and call my function here. So to do that, I'm going to select the parent. Oops, let me get my shift delete to kind of create an extra row here. And I called it, did I call it PowerApps button? I could have sworn I renamed that. Okay, well, we'll call the other one I created earlier PowerApps button. Yeah, it's being stubborn right now. Okay, so no problem. So we'll go ahead and I'll call my delete PowerApps. Oh, for some reason, it's not wanting to call that right now. Let me try this one more time here. Okay. Let me just pick a new button here. Just kind of get the code on there initially. Let me insert any kind of icon here I want, whatever, and we'll just steal that code once it comes over. And I'll do actions, and we'll call the existing flow we have this time. So I'll call this delete PowerApp button there, and then that code will now be stepped on here. So we'll see it right here. Now, one thing you'll notice, if you change the names of PowerApps, that's why I'm not calling this one right here, you sometimes have to leave PowerApps and come back. So it creates a little bit of weirdness there. Because you'll notice right here, my actual name is not PowerApps button, but it's called delete PowerApps or delete project by PowerApps. So this can create some weirdness inside of here we got to be careful of. So that's why I'm using my backup one right here instead. So now that I have that code, let me go ahead and steal that code and then pop that into my trash can. There we go. I think what happened there is it has too many things all in one. Oh, and it's in the gallery. There we go. All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to select the parent. Then I'm going to run this flow, and I'm going to pass in this item dot project ID. There we go. In that with a parenthesis. So I'm going to show the spinner because it might take a few seconds to do this. I'm going to select the parent. I'm going to pass in what item I selected, this item.project ID, and then I'm going to turn the spinner to false now. For long processes, your users aren't going to look up at that little dancing ants up there and actually understand what that means. So that's why I am actually putting a manual spinner in here in my case also. So if I go back over here to play, let's try this one more time now. So I'm going to go up, and I'm going to hit the delete my Hindi projects here. We'll see there's my spinner, and a few seconds later. Okay. Oh, one more process here. Because it's not aware of what the flow is doing, I also might want to refresh this data as well after that. So that's what's happening right now. Is it's running the flow, and then it doesn't know that the data's been changed. So in my case, let me go ahead and just add a dummy project. Actually, I'll just delete the Spanish one. That's fine. This is my last video on this. I'll go under here again, pick my icon one last time, And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to manually refresh also. So I'm going to refresh my project data set here. There we go. I think it's called projects. And that's not the name. Okay, there it is. All right, so let's try this one more time with our last project we have here. So by refreshing the projects, our customers will now see that something actually happened. So I'll click this. Now we could also wrap this in an is_error, which is an experimental feature inside of Flow that will trap the error if it occurs and then respond back with some kind of error code in the top red toast that you'll see up there in your URL. So now there we go. That's all there is to calling a flow within that. Now, a few gotchas I found: make sure you're part of the same environment, which it will automatically drop you in the right environment when you're doing this. If you hit from actions and flows, but if you happen to go just to flow.microsoft.com, it might drop you in the wrong environment. In that case, it won't be able to see that flow. The other gotcha you can use is you can go over here. Let me find my other flow that we've been calling over and over again, which is this guy right here. And we can kind of watch the last transactions that have run right here. You can even step into it and kind of watch the transaction of how long each step took to run. You can see this one took 4 seconds to run, 5 seconds in this case. So these are kind of some neat ways you can kind of debug. You can even go inside this and figure out what parameter is passed in, and you can see kind of the JSON piece right here as well, or the parameters that were passed in as well. So Flow gives you a lot of flexibility on this. Now we'll be using Flow later to do things like OCRing of data using computer vision and those kind of things. But Flow gives you a lot of flexibility from within PowerApps. Now, if you do want to see Flow, so if you want to see stored procedures directly in PowerApps, please do vote on that link down below as well. I'll add that in a few seconds also. Hope you enjoyed this presentation though, and this is part of our PowerApps class. That link is down below as well, and have a great day. Thanks.